Was a quiet morning when everything changed in the Henry household. 4 years Nana Rose had lived peacefully with her husband, Richard Henry, and his elderly mother, Margaret Henry, in a warm little house filled with laughter, memories, and the faint smell of old books. But lately that warmth had begun to fade. Margaret's memory had started to slip away, first in small ways, forgetting keys and birthdays, then in painful, heartbreaking ways. She often didn't recognize her own son, sometimes mistook Rose for her late sister, and occasionally woke up in the middle of the night calling for people who had long passed away. Richard had tried to be patient. For months he balanced work, bills, and his mother's unpredictable moods. But over time the exhaustion grew heavier. The woman who once held his hand through every storm was now a shadow of herself. Fragile, confused, and angry at the world she no longer understood. Every day brought new heartbreaks. Margaret would accuse Rose of hiding things, scream when dinner wasn't served the way she liked, or cry for hours, remembering a past that no longer existed. One evening Richard sat in the living room, staring at the walls that once echoed with laughter. He felt helpless, like a son who had already lost his mother even though she was still alive. The idea had been growing inside him for weeks, quietly, like a storm building behind closed clouds. That night he told Rose the words that broke her heart. He said he was thinking of moving his mother to a nursing home. Rose went silent. She looked at him in disbelief, as if he had spoken something forbidden. She tried to convince him that maybe Margaret just needed more care, more love, maybe even a nurse at home. But Richard's mind was set. He wasn't cold-hearted. He was just tired, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. He told her, "She'll be safer there. They'll take better care of her than we can." But even as he said it, his voice trembled with guilt. The next morning came with heavy clouds and heavier silence. Rose helped Margaret dress up, telling her they were going on a little trip. Margaret smiled, her eyes bright with innocence, unaware of where they were going. Richard loaded the car, his hands shaking. He didn't say a word during the drive. Only the sound of rain on the windshield and Margaret's soft humming filled the car. She was singing a lullaby she used to sing to him when he was a child. When they reached the nursing home, everything felt too clean, too quiet, too final. Richard walked his mother to her room, white sheets, flowers by the window, a nurse with a gentle smile. Margaret looked around, confused. "Where are we?" she asked softly. Richard forced a smile and said, "Somewhere nice, Mom." But when he turned to leave, she caught his hand and whispered something that pierced his soul. "Don't forget to feed the cat, Richard." There was no cat anymore. That cat had died when Richard was 10. But those were the exact words she had said to him on the day his father left them, decades ago. It was as if her broken memory had reached for the one place where love still lived, the past. In that moment Richard's breath caught in his throat. He looked into her tired eyes and suddenly saw not a burden, but the woman who had once worked double shifts to feed him, who had wiped his tears when he failed in school, who had stood proudly at his wedding saying, "That's my boy." As he walked out of the home, guilt began clawing at his heart. He couldn't stop hearing her voice, couldn't stop seeing her small trembling hands. Every mile he drove away, he felt a piece of himself breaking. Halfway home he suddenly pulled over, parked the car by the side of the road, and buried his face in his hands. "What have I done?" he whispered to himself. Rose placed her hand gently on his shoulder and said, "You still have time, Richard. Go back. Bring her home." Without another word, he turned the car around and drove back like a man running against regret. When they arrived, Margaret was sitting by the window, clutching a photograph, a young Richard in her arms. She looked up as he walked in, her eyes lighting up just for a second, as if the fog had cleared. "Richard," she said softly. He knelt beside her and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. You're coming home." And for the first time in weeks she smiled. Life after that was not easy. Margaret's health kept fading, her memory slipping further. But the house began to feel like home again, full of quiet, soft moments of care. Rose cooked Margaret's favorite meals, even when she forgot to eat. Richard read her stories at night, the same ones she once read to him. Some days she called him by another name. Some days she didn't speak at all. But there were still small golden moments, like when she would hold his hand, or when she would hum the lullaby again and say, My boy always loved this song. Time passed and seasons changed. Then one evening Margaret asked to see the sunset. Rose and Richard helped her sit by the porch. The golden light bathed her face and she looked peaceful, almost childlike. She held her son's hand and said, "When your father left, I thought I'd never be loved again. But you gave me everything I ever wanted: love, pride, and a home. Don't ever think you failed me, Richard." He cried silently, knowing those might be her last clear words. That night, Margaret passed away in her sleep, holding his photograph close to her chest. There were no tears on her face, only calm, as if she had waited for that final sunset to say goodbye. At the funeral, Richard stood beside Rose, his voice breaking as he said, "I almost left her to die alone in a place that didn't know her. I almost forgot who she was. My mother, my first love, my first protector." Rose held his hand and whispered, "But you didn't. You brought her home. And that's what matters." After that, something in Richard changed forever. He began visiting the nursing home every week, bringing flowers, books, and stories to the lonely faces sitting by the windows. He spoke to them with the same kindness he had once forgotten to give. Every time he looked into their eyes, he saw a glimpse of his mother, Margaret Henry, the woman who never gave up on him. Years later, Rose would tell this story to her viewers, her voice soft and trembling. The day Richard Henry tried to leave his mother was the day he found her again. Love doesn't fade with age. It only waits for us to remember it. And millions would watch, some crying, some silent. Each one reminded that no matter how far we drift, we always find our way back to love.